I was sitting here on this random Monday night thinking to myself, man, I need something nerdy to do. Then I thought to myself, well, there's this franchise that I love so much that's been running for 30 years. They just came out with a trailer, and I have hardly talked about it besides my review. Well, here we go. I have it. I'm Cousin Cheeto with Nerd Nation, and this is my top 10 reasons why Final Fantasy XVI will not suck. Number 10, it's a return to form. Returning to the classic Final Fantasy style not only worked for one of my favorites of all time, Final Fantasy IX, but made it so that it could focus on the story now. One of the greatest things that happened in Final Fantasy history, in my opinion, is the return to form, where you have a couple games that are kind of out there, they're sci-fi-ish, but this one right here is returning to its Final Fantasy roots. Number 9, the battle system. We only saw a small sample of the gameplay, and people say that it looked a lot like Devil May Cry. Well, guess what? Given that Final Fantasy usually always changes its battle mechanics with the following installments, Devil May Cry may not be a terrible format for an action RPG. If you think about it, I mean, this is kind of one of the natural steps in the right direction for this franchise. Am I saying that it's the best? No. Am I even saying it's what I want? No. But I say let's give it a shot. And although I don't feel like that this is the route they're going, we'll see what happens. Number 8, having a single protagonist. Although I do not think that this will be in the final product. Let's hypothesize for a moment, shall we? If there will be only a single character you play as, you have numerous supporting characters, kind of like in an Assassin's Creed, Devil May Cry, and many other games throughout action RPGs. Final Fantasy is known for its elaborate and diverse parties, but besides the MMOs, we have not had a single protagonist experience. Maybe it will work, and maybe it won't. But it will definitely be decisive, and that's for sure. Number 7, the summon enhanced attacks. We got a small snippet of this in the trailer, where whatever your nation's summon was, whether it be Phoenix, Titan, Shiva, it looked like that you had like enhanced attacks based on whatever that summon's element was. So, there's a part in the trailer where you can see like the Titan's hands kind of flying with the attacks. Phoenix was in some of the main protagonist's attacks. So it seems like it's a little bit of an interesting where it's a summon just doesn't come and help. It also enhances maybe your entire being as a character. So I think that's a little bit interesting, and I think that's going to be a really interesting dynamic in this whole thing. Number 6. There's probably going to be a time skip. In the trailer, we saw that there were signs of the protagonist as a young man, as well as an older young adult. So one of the games that I love from my past, it's called Breath of Fire 3. And in this game, you start off as a young kid, and you're playing about 10, 12 hours of the game, and then you get to a certain point, you collect your party members and everything, and then you get to a certain point in the game, and then there's like a 10, 7, 5-year time skip in there, and and obviously a lot has changed in the world, and that is honestly in Breath of Fire 3. That is one of my favorite parts of that game, is that they took a character in the middle of the story, and I'm not talking about like Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 15 just dumped a 10-year time skip at the end, but in the middle of the story, when all the party was established, the characters were just coming into their own, and they said, you know what? We're going to put a time skip in here, and everyone's going to go off and do their own thing, and you have to gather everybody back up. And as I said, 15 did it wrong. Breath of Fire 3 did it right. So I'm hoping that we will see this in this game, is that you start off as a young lad, and you're kind of working your way through the story. You get a decent amount into the story, a couple of hours. An event happens, and then you get a 10-year time, or not 10-year, we don't need 10-year, like a 5-year time skip. And I mean, that obviously is going to happen because we see the, the younger lad with the chocobo, with the white chocobo and everything like that. Probably what happens is, whatever that incident is with Joshua happens, and then, I believe Phoenix is killed. In my opinion, that if Ifrit kills Phoenix, and in turn kills Joshua, and then that opens the floodgates for a whole war. So I know, I kind of went on a tangent there, but you got it. Number 5. Bloody hell. That's right. There was a bunch of blood in this. Maybe not like Game of Thrones or The Boys level of blood and gore, but there was more blood in this than most Final Fantasies, and I don't count Type 0. I mean, I know it is a Final Fantasy, but it's not a mainline Final. This is gore in a main Final Fantasy. So I really appreciate the fact that this franchise is, as I've always said about other shows, growing up with its fan base. They know that the younger kids are not playing this game really, so they're just like, you know what, let's just either throw a T or an M rating on it and just go for it. And I appreciate that. Number 4, badass white Dragoon. Now, I am a Dragoon in Final Fantasy XIV, and I would love it if the main baddie in this game was a Dragoon. Now, I know the Dragoon, or the white Dragoon in the trailer, probably was not the main villain, but wouldn't it be cool if, like, the main villain was a Dragoon-type character, and just, I feel like we haven't had anything like that in Final Fantasy before, so I really think that would be really cool, and for us Dragoon lovers, me, would be awesome. Number 3, the graphics. Alright, so I'm going to level with you guys. This was an early look. Inevitably, the graphics will get improved as production goes on, but let's look at 2 games that knocked it out of the park with less focus on graphics. Final Fantasy IX and Dragon Quest XI. Both were fantastic games, had great gameplay, and they were great. They were awesome games. They tried to go for hyper-realistic in Final Fantasy VIII, and it did not work out all that well. Final Fantasy IX made it a little bit more cartoony with a little bit of the hyper-realistic look. Fantastic. Dragon Quest XI, very cartoony. All Dragon Quest games are, but it was such a good game. You don't have... I know everyone's like, oh, it's an early PS4, late PS3 game. Okay, I understand. You want more from a Final Fantasy for a PS5. But what if we get a early PS4 game with a PS5 dense game? Honestly, if the game is good and dense, I don't mind the lower graphics. The graphics look fine to me. Everyone's like, oh, this, that, and the other. I mean, the cinematic parts of the game looked fantastic. It looked just as good as Final Fantasy XIV's Shadowbringers, and probably better than 15, let's be real. To me, at least. I don't know. But I mean, everyone's like, oh, the in-game cinematics look more like, look like that. And I'm like, okay, whatever. You know what, if you're gonna be that offended, then be offended. But I honestly feel like I would much rather have a better gameplay experience and a great story and the graphics be good. Number 2. The story so far seems so great. I know it's way too early to tell, but when the knight was surprised that there was a second fire summon, and it was a way of looking at summons that had not been done before, they worship these entities and think that there is only one of each element, and this second one shows up and just destroys their belief. It's set up on a platinum level, and honestly, I like it. I honestly feel like we haven't gotten this kind of depth in a story. I mean, 15, no. 15 was focused on the looks. 15 was focused on the graphics. Not really the story, because the story made no frickin' sense whatsoever. So going back, I really feel like that this is kind of a return, because the last great story in Final Fantasy, for me, was 9. And I know I keep comparing this game to 9, and I feel like it's because it is a return to that format. And I really feel like that Final Fantasy 9 and 16 will kind of go hand in hand together as this golden renaissance for the Final Fantasy franchise. Number 1, summons, baby. Like Final Fantasy VI, 9, 10, and 14, summons are very integral to the plot. And one thing only that Final Fantasy VIII did well was their summon system. And that junction part of the summon system. However, I'm just glad that they were bringing summons back into the fold. Shiva is my all-time favorite summon of all time. And she had a great look in this trailer. Titan was in it, Ifrit was in it, Phoenix was in it, but I really feel like that there's going to be a lot more summons in this. It's not just going to be those 4. Like, there's definitely going to be more. I feel like there has to be more. Probably a lightning, maybe even a wind, but I really feel like that in this game and the focus on the summons, I really feel like, again, I know, Final Fantasy IX, but in Final Fantasy IX, 10, those 2 games the summons were an integral part of their story, and their story was just great. Final Fantasy X was very linear for me, but it's still within my top 3 or maybe top 5 Final Fantasies. And the summon parts of those games, both those games, just knocked it out of the park. The summons were so well done in those games. The story around those summons were done so well. And they were cool. And the way they used them was great. So that is my top 10 reasons why Final Fantasy XVI won't suck. If you enjoyed this review, please comment, like, and subscribe. If you like Final Fantasy IX, comment, like, and subscribe, because I love Final Fantasy IX. You never know. You may see a playthrough on my gaming channel, Milquetoast Gaming. Maybe the link in the description if you want to check it out. Anyway, I'm Cousin Cheeto from Nerd Nation. I'll see you guys next time.
The legacy of the crystals has shaped our history.